Welcome back to the Word for the Valley podcast, where we listen to sermons from Pastor Mike's in-depth teaching through the book of Matthew. And we're picking back up in chapter 12, continuing to explore the tension between legalistic rule-keeping and true devotion to God. And in this passage, Jesus reminds us that God desires mercy, not just sacrifice or obligation. He tells the Pharisees, "If you had understood this, you would have not condemned the guiltless," referring to his disciples. And then he makes a bold declaration saying, "For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Here, Jesus is asserting his divine authority, showing that he himself is God and the true fulfillment of the Sabbath. All right, let's get back into our Bibles at chapter 12, verse 7.
There's one greater than the temple, that's Jesus. But Jesus says in verse 7, if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you have not condemned the guiltless. Now, this is the second time he quotes this verse from Hosea. Matthew 9, verse 13, he had quoted it again, or the first time. And it again is stressing the point that, guys, you have focused everything on the externals. You have focused everything on the performance. You're so much more concerned with how this looks than how it is. You're just trying to present right, which is literally the definition of hypocrisy. You are only concerned about the mask. You are not concerned about your heart. God, on the other hand, desires mercy to the exclusion of sacrifice if sacrifice gets in the way of mercy. He'd much rather love, grace, fellowship than the mere remote or rote kind of execution of rules. Right? Bryn came home for Thanksgiving. And I knew it was coming because she had asked a few questions, leading questions. She was trying to get around it. She'll ask me, what's mom's shirt size? And then she'll ask mom, what's dad's shirt size? Like we didn't put two and two together? Like we don't talk? Kind of. Bryn, you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. Actually, don't do it. You don't have any money. What are you doing, right? You have another semester here to pay. Don't buy us stuff, kind of thing, right? And she's like, and she buys Aiden a shirt, right? I don't know if there's ever been a day in Aiden's life he's thought of buying Bryn anything, right? Or kind of. And here, that's not fair. But Bryn's like so eager and excited to be home that she wants to do something to bless us. And here we are like, don't, honey, don't. You don't have to, I know, kind of thing. And the gifts are so uniquely designed for us. She bought me a Carhartt t-shirt. She said, Dad, you're just so practical, and you're going to wear shirts until you can see through them. You'll never get through this shirt. You'll die before this shirt wears out, kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, perfect. I do literally have some shirts I can see through. I put them on and you can see out. Like you get them close enough, you can see out through them. Those are great bedtime shirts. I'm not giving them up. As long as my hands know where to get through them. I'm not giving them up, right? So a Carhartt, bought Mom's slippers. I know your feet always get cold. Mom, Julie's feet are always freezing, right? So I bought Aiden a Messiah Wrestling t-shirt. I don't have to do any of that. But the mercy to extend beyond the obligation, it's gold. God wants us to offer him those kinds of things, right? Why do we only do what we're obliged to do by God? Why don't we also do the things that we know do bless him, that he doesn't require of us, but we do it over and above what's obliged of us, what's expected of us, and it blesses us, his heart. You don't need to do it. God didn't tell us you have to do it. You have to be a pastor. God never came to me and said, you have to be a pastor. If you want to follow me, this is my leading in your life, and this is my calling on your life. If you want to walk with me all the way, you can do this, but I'm not doing it out of obligation. I'm doing it because I want to serve God, and I want to give more of my time to God, not less. Right? The world takes up too much up already. I want to do more. I don't want to do less. Right? God wants that desire out of us. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, not just obligation. He said, if you would understand that, you would have not condemned the guiltless, and the disciples here are the guiltless. For the Son of Man, look, is Lord, even of the Sabbath. And this is the trump card over this whole scene. He's basically saying, listen, if you think God deserves rightful service on the Sabbath, he says, I am the Lord over the Sabbath, meaning I am God too. He's making a deistic statement about himself here. I am the God that you can serve on the Sabbath and not break the Sabbath for. So now verse 9. Now, when he had departed from there, he went into their synagogue. Now, the way Matthew writes this, the order gets changed and the division of days get changed in Mark and Luke. So it's a little bit hard to tell. But the way Matthew writes it, it's like he had a confrontation with the religious leaders on the way to church. And then he went to church where the religious leaders were leading the church. Who of us would do this? Right? Get scolded by the pastor on the way to church, and then you go to church, you're like, uh-oh, Pastor so-and-so's here. I conveniently got sick. I can't do it, right? Well, Jesus just had this confrontation with the religious leaders, and he's like, we're going to their church. Right? This is going to be fun. He is not backing down. He is not cowering away from this. Because Jesus is right, he doesn't need to back down. He can just stand where he needs to stand. I love there in verse 9, Matthew actually says it's their synagogue. Apparently it's not Jesus's anymore, it's theirs. They had taken the church over and made it their own. It's not God's. It's actually more filled with God when Jesus is there than at any other time in that synagogue. He goes into their synagogue. Some of the commentaries just make point, like Jesus went to church, right? Jesus went to bad churches. Like really bad churches. Churches, the end of this service, they're going to try to kill Jesus. Right? That's a bad church. Okay? If your elders conspire at the end of service to have you executed, that's not the church you probably want to go to. You want to reconsider, right? But Jesus does it anyway. Again, because there's something more to it than just this. There's something this way with Christ. It means something. In verse 10, and behold, there was a man who had a withered hand. Retracted and shriveled is the idea of the word withered. The early Bible commentaries, and we don't know this to be true from the actual scriptures, but the early Bible commentary said it was his right hand, which is his dominant hand, his work hand, which would make it really hard for him to do the things he'd be obliged to do in life. He had a withered hand. And the religious leaders asked him, saying, is it lawful? They're coming right back to it. Like they didn't get the lesson the first time. They're going to do it again, right? Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And they do this all so that they might accuse him. So we don't know how many times this man has gone to this synagogue. It does seem like the religious leaders know he's going to be there. Now they see Jesus coming. They know Jesus and this man with the withered hand are both going to be there on the same day. And they know that that's going to create a lot of temptation for Jesus to do something nice, right, on this particular day. They know that Jesus can't draw near without also wanting to heal. They know that about Jesus. It tells us in the book of Psalms that he draws near to the brokenhearted. If you're drawing near to him and he's drawing near to you, he will work to heal you. He will not leave you in your crippled state. He wants to do that. The religious leaders know the nature of Jesus. They know he's sitting there all through service, like chewing his nails, thinking like, can I just get this guy aside somewhere and go heal this hand or do something? I need to do something for this guy. They know the whole thing. And so to them, it becomes a bit of a setup, an opportunity there to accuse Christ. Well, in verse 11, then it says that he said to them. Now, Mark gives us the additional information that when the religious leaders kind of put the man forward in this way before Jesus, that he gets angry at them. That Jesus is angry at them in his heart. Right? We're told in the New Testament, be angry and sin not. Anger in and of itself is not sin as long as the anger is directed in the right direction. And frankly, when it is something that requires hatred or anger, hate that which is evil, cling to that which is good. When it requires that, if you don't get angry for the right reasons, then you're probably sinning in the other direction. Here there's a situation where a man is being used as a pawn by the religious leaders, and it is a man with a crippled arm. Never, ever in the history of the church should somebody with a deformity, with a crippling, with a disease, with a suffering in any way be used as a pawn, except we've seen it in the last, 25 years of the Pentecostal church, and the healings and signs stuff that goes all over the world and makes these people just displays of some type of power that is just gross in the eyes of God. Jesus would take these people aside. He would not put them up on stage and then touch their forehead and make them writhe on the deck until somebody throws a blanket over them because they become immodest. Completely contrary to the nature of Jesus Christ. This man here brought before Jesus and apparently before the congregation, kind of put on display to see what Jesus will do with them. He's angry with them and says, "What man is there among you who has one sheep?" And if you own a sheep here, because Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath, he owns this man, right? If you have a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, we will not lay hold of it and lift it out. And this is one of those things that got debated. Edersheim makes note of this. Certain religious leaders would say no, just throw it some food and hope it's, make sure no coyotes get down in there, and no hyenas or whatever get down in there, but just throw it some food, let it survive the Sabbath, and then sundown Saturday you can go right back out there and get that sheep out of that hole and move on with your life and hope that it doesn't hold it against you, kind of thing. But or others would say, listen, to preserve life is really significant to the Jewish people. To preserve life, you would be allowed to pull this out. Jesus assumes that these guys would do this. He makes the assumption that if they lose a sheep, they're going to go try to get it, right? Because these guys really are much more about the money, the sheep, and the business than they are about people anyway. So he makes that assumption. You have a sheep, it's going to fall into a pit, even on the Sabbath, you're not going to go get it, lift it out. Then he says, of how much more value then is a man than a sheep? He says, therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. And in Luke, he expands on that, right? It's always right to do good. Even on the Sabbath, it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath, right? So that's enough explanation to these religious leaders. He turns to the man. And he says to the man, now, apparently this is in front of everybody. Jesus could have just left well enough alone. Could have handed them a little ticket that said, hey, meet me outside the church about, 12:30 or something, right? Or you can come over for lunch. Mrs. Peters got something cooking, kind of thing, and you'd meet us there. We'll hook you up with the healing and that kind of stuff. He could have done this in any other way. But he's making a point. The religious leaders have already made this man the point, right? Jesus is going to follow through with it and actually bless the man in the process. And he says to the man here, he says, stretch out your hand. Stretch out your hand. Which, in fact, if Jesus is not God, and this man does not get healed, is literally the cruelest thing you could ever do to somebody with a crippled deformity. Oh, I see your leg doesn't work right. Here, let's show everybody. Oh, I see your hand doesn't work right. Hey, for everybody's sake here, just stretch it out. Stretch it out. And to see this man struggle to get his arm out. Argue with Jesus over it. I can't do that. I've had this for how many years? There's no way. Stretch it out. Stretch it out. Now, in the middle of the scene, even in this synagogue, with those religious leaders, there's something happening between a person with a crippling nature and Jesus. Jesus will meet you anywhere you want to meet him, if you're serious enough about meeting him. But here's the catch. He will look at you and say, stretch out your deformity. Stretch out your hand. That big gaping wound of your past, let's talk about that. You want me to heal you? Let's start there. You're like, no. I've guarded this wound. I've protected this wound. I've hidden this wound. Nobody knows that I have that wound. Everybody in the world knows you have the wound. You're not hiding it. And it comes out at completely the wrongest times, when you need it most. Why did I react that way? Because the wound is there. I just wanted to help carry this thing, but your hand literally does not work. Stretch it out. In front of everybody? Yes, in front of everybody. But what if it doesn't? Just stretch it out already. I'm sure he was much nicer than that. Stretch it out. And literally, verse 13, it says he stretched it out and it was restored. The tenses are, as he was stretching it out, it was restored. If this man doesn't expose his wound, it doesn't get healed. You just keep hiding it, it doesn't get fixed. Right? Again, if you are one that just pushes stuff under the carpet, what you're going to end up with is a really lumpy carpet. It doesn't disappear there. It doesn't disappear there. At some point, somebody will stumble over it, and it will probably be you. Stretch it out. Well, I can't do it. Listen, if you couldn't do it, he wouldn't have asked you to do it. If you couldn't do it, he would not have asked you to do it. That's, when my kids were 2, I didn't ask them to run a 10-second 100-meter dash. I still don't. But that's, but you wouldn't put a burden on a child that they literally can't carry. That's cruelty. It's probably borderline abuse. The only reason Jesus will ask this man to do it is because he knows that if this man is willing to take the step of faith or the reach of faith to do this, that in so doing, the power for the healing will come. So as he stretches it out, and you can imagine, this would be so much fun to have on camera, video, right? The snap, crackling, and popping of bones going back in, and the ligaments coming back in, when the muscles forming, and like, yeah, it's like Captain America coming out of the chamber, kind of, look at that thing, kind of thing, and just, yes, whatever, Thor or something, yes, look at that, how pumped would this dude be? He'd be shaking hands with everybody in church. Up until this point, it was like, I was like, yes, right? He'd be crushing fingers on the way out. Let me show you, right? God's commandments are always his enablements. Because Jesus is, in fact, God. He will help you to do that which is impossible to do in the flesh. You can't do it on your own. He knows that. But when he comes across in your life and says, all right, now we're going to do this, then just do it. Don't even question. If he said to do it, you just do it. You get into that pit and you row as fast as you can get through that. Just dig and go and do whatever you got. Just do it. Don't question him. Stretch it out. Okay, stretch it out. Let's see what God does. Right? Listen, I think a lot of us, maybe in some ways, maybe not a lot of us, some of us, I've heard it before, where individuals will wonder, like, why don't I see more miracles? Why don't I see more reality of God? Why don't I see greater stuff happen in my life? Like, I read about this in the book of Acts. I read about this in the Bible. Why don't I see any of this? You don't need it. You don't need it. You have everything that you have. You have everything that you need to do what you're doing right now. And so if you keep doing the natural life, you keep doing the normal life, you keep doing that, then you don't have a need to see miracles. The only reason the need to see a miracle, and Jesus doesn't throw miracles around frivolously, just like, oh, hey, look at this, like it's a carnival. He gives the miracles to those who need it the most. If you want to see Jesus do miracles, you go where it's needed the most. And he will do miracles. George Mueller didn't get the supply in his life until he gave up his salary. He gave up his salary first. Mostly because the salary was taken by putting boxes on the end of the pews, right? And the boxes had a number on it that you had to basically pay to sit in your seat. That's how you came to church back in George Mueller's day in the early 1900s, right? And the sit up front cost more. This is probably where we've gotten the tradition that everybody wants to sit in the back, right? But this is before speaker systems and projection systems, and so if you wanted to actually hear hearing aids and a lot of other stuff, you didn't have it. If you wanted to hear the service, you probably sat closer to the front, right? And George Mueller was a preacher that you wanted to hear. They would travel from America by boat to hear George Mueller preach. But when he realized it was an ungodly practice, he said, listen, we're not doing church that way. We'll do boxes or offering plates or something. People can give to the things of God, but they're not paying for their seats because that sets up a James chapter 2 kind of situation that's really off, right? The rich are preferred over the poor. He said, we're not doing that anymore. And he found as a result of taking the boxes off the seats that the church income went up. It's like, that's odd, right? I thought if we took the obligation away, that everything would just kind of die down to the bare minimum. That's not how God works. That's not how God works, right? You step out in faith, the supply comes. The supply comes. You're not going to get it all up front. You're not going to get it all up front. You're going to have to stretch it out and wait to see him supply them in the process. Well, verse 14, the Pharisees now again went out and plotted against him how they might destroy him. The hypocrisy of Pharisees is pretty interesting to me. Apparently, it's wrong to eat a few kernels of grain on the Sabbath day if you're Jesus' disciples. It's also apparently wrong to heal a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath day if you're Jesus himself. But it's fine if after service is over, you have a meeting where you literally plan to kill somebody. That's fine. That's not work. We're resting. That's fun. We're just that's just fun. Kind of thing. How off base can we get when we do not put Jesus at the center of things? We will excuse all kinds of nonsense, even within ourselves. And you look back years and years later, why in the world did I ever even think that was even close to right? How did I even justify that behavior? Right? Well, you're human. And the enemy helps, and the world feeds it, where you will be allowed to justify any ungodliness to keep you in your ungodliness. God wants you to come to him in Jesus Christ, which is an act of faith. And it's a response to his call. And it is as real today as it was here in Matthew chapter 12. We still see Jesus do miracles. We still see Jesus do healings. I have a few stories, not maybe as many as I would like. There was a season it was just a couple months ago. I got a text from Reuben. I got prayer requests were coming in, and I'm like, all right, Lord, I'm going to pray. They asked me to pray, so I'll pray. I said, yes, I'll pray. By the way, if you tell somebody you're going to pray, you should probably just pray, all right? I'm not all about yes, we're praying. Don't text me you're praying, just pray. I don't need to know that you're texting me nonetheless, that's my hang up. But nonetheless, and so pray, and it was 3 or 4 within 2 weeks. And answer. Healing, miraculous. The one with Reuben's friend, I thought the young boy was going to die. It didn't have a whole lot of faith on my part, apparently. My Lord, I know you can do this. Right? And then I'm getting texts and pictures, and the boy's coming back, and wow, this is awesome. Kind of thing. Wasn't for me, I'll probably never know this kid on this side of eternity. Right? But God still works. Right? Go to Jesus. All right, if you will, let's stand.
One thing we learn from this passage is how easy it is to let rules or traditions take priority over Jesus himself. Yet God continues to call us to faith, inviting us to trust him, follow him, and experience his power and presence in our lives today. No matter the distractions or excuses, his invitation remains. Come to me and let me lead you. All right, that's all for now. Thanks for listening to the Word for the Valley podcast. So long, everyone.